Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And just hopping up here, I'm on my lunch break actually, and just wanted to get some thoughts out regarding what I feel is a pretty interesting situation occurring in WWE right now, namely regarding Rhea Ripley. And for probably the first time, at least that I can recall, really significantly, since she's been a top star in the company, and she's been really the top star, almost undisputed, of the women's division, going back to maybe I would say going back to 2023 in terms of really being at the tippity top, always in contention for, championships and, really being the most featured women's performer on any show that she's on. But for the first time, it feels like Rhea Ripley may be experiencing some fan backlash. So last week, the announcement was made that Rhea Ripley would be she's been out for an injury for quite a while, and I don't believe she's wrestled since the Clash in Italy show, which would have been, I believe that show was in May, if I'm correct. Now, don't quote me, but she hasn't wrestled for roughly about 2 months, if not a little over 2 months, as of right now. And ironically, she was still the champion. There had been no mention about, stripping of the belt or anything. She was still the champion, although she hasn't competed, since I believe that match with Jade Cargill at the Clash in Italy, if my memory serves me correct. And then it was announced last week that instead of being stripped for the belt, that they're going to do an interim champion, basically series of matches on SmackDown, where it's a series of matches, and the winners will compete in a ladder match at SummerSlam to become the new interim women's champion. So basically, Rhea's not stripped; she still is going to be the women's champion. She still is a women's champion right now, and there will be an interim champion crowned at SummerSlam. And the plan is that I'm certain that when she comes back, they will meet in some kind of a unification match. So the real issue at hand is that the real issue at hand is that Rhea, where I think a lot of the some of the fan resentment comes from, is that Rhea was she's not being stripped of the belt, although she hasn't defended it in a couple of months. And with the way her injury is, and they're kind of been really vague about it, she damaged her meniscus. And again, they kind of make it sound she could be back sooner than expected, but it still may be a while. But basically, I don't see her coming back until at least maybe September-ish, I would say, at the earliest. So it's just a unique situation with her, and it could be October, who knows. But it's very unique because in most situations, and almost every situation in WWE traditionally, and even in AEW to an extent, she would have been stripped of the belt. And even there's a good example of AEW lately. Willow Nightingale, she was injured. She had an injury during her TBS title run, and she vacated the belt. And they just had of course, then they had a tournament in the interim, which Hikaru Shida. But long story short is that Willow vacated the belt. And I even go back to about a decade ago with Finn Balor. Who, and a lot of fans do not remember because it was really like 24 hours. Finn Balor he does have a reign as Universal Champion underneath his belt. However, the average fan has forgotten it because he was stripped of the belt literally the next night on Raw after SummerSlam of 2016 because of an injury. Now, I forgot how his injury, it was something with his arm because he was in a sling. I remember that. And I'm not sure how quickly he came back from that. But it's just an interesting precedent in that Finn was stripped of the belt, whereas Rhea was allowed to keep hers for months and is still allowed to pretty much be champion. And that has gotten, there's brought some criticism, which I do feel is somewhat valid, of her being very protected. If not, the words I've seen is overprotected by Triple H. It's common knowledge that Rhea Ripley is one of Triple H's handpicked favorites. Ever since Rhea's real rise as being the top woman in WWE coincides roughly with Triple H's taking over creative around 2022. Since that time frame, Rhea has literally almost exclusively been at the top, and when I say been at the top, always wrestling for the main women's belt on either Raw or SmackDown. She gets the most screen time, and she's a big star, no doubt about it. Rhea deserves her stardom. She's a good wrestler, very over, unique look, but I have seen some criticisms that even before this, that Rhea Ripley is Triple H's example of what a perfect wrestler looks like, women's wrestler looks like in his eyes. Triple H is very, at least back in his prime, Triple H was very much into kind of the rock and, rock and roll kind of aesthetic, and Rhea has that kind of dark, kind of rockish vibe, and even with the tattoos and things of that nature. And he just, every promoter, every booker has their favorites. There's no crime in that. But I just think that this situation has really caused a lot of fans to, and there's some sirens going on. See? That's what happened when we're outside recording. But yeah, so I just think it's really interesting to see. And, and I've seen some of the chatter online and message boards and, social media. And it'll be interesting to see how she's received by the fans when she returns from her injury. It's interesting, again, very interesting to see, because Rhea has, to my knowledge, she has been universally praised, not receiving much criticism at all since she's catapulted to the top. And this is kind of maybe the first time I've really seen a negative fan sentiment towards her. And again, it's probably from what we call in wrestling the vocal minority. I doubt, when Rhea comes on, when she returns on Raw, on SmackDown or at a PLE, I'm sure she's going to get a thunderous reaction. She's going to be the most over woman in the building, but it is just something to kind of observe going forward. And Rhea, I was actually thinking about her track record as pretty much a main eventer in the women's division, and I think I was just calculating in my head before this video, she has competed for the major women's belt at, I think, every WrestleMania since since 20, with the exception of one, I think since 2021, because she beat Io at the first WrestleMania. She beat Asuka in WrestleMania 2021. 2022, I'm not for sure. 23, she had a classic with Charlotte. 24, she pinned Becky clean. Then 2025 is when the classic triple threat match with Bianca and Io, and then this past year at Mania, this year, she beat Jade Cargill. So, that's a lot of real estate at the top of the cards. And one thing that WWE has been really, they definitely need to address sooner than later in the men's division as well, is that there has been a staleness at the top of the cards lately in terms of seeing the same names on top with the major belts, particularly with the men, the big three of Roman, Punk, and Cody. And we got to start incorporating some new blood into there. And then on the women's side, it's really it's been Liv. Maria's been at the top for a very long time. Io and Liv has been, she's pretty much been at that point. But just kind of interesting. Again, it's just something to think about. And even and I was talking with some friends about the situation, I think last week, and even with Rhea, it's very few periods where, even if she doesn't have the main belt, as last year she was a tag team champion, her and Io spent significant time in the tag team division kind of building that up, but it's always geared towards her, getting back into contention for the belt. So Rhea's at the stage in her career where she's a consistently top person, where when she doesn't have the belt, it's only a matter of time, until Elimination Chamber season or Rumble season, where she's going to be back in contention for that Mania title match. So again, just interesting to observe and see, and let me know what you think. Do you think that it was the right call for WWE to keep the belt on Rhea with her being absent for such a long period of time? And just let me know what you think about that in the comments. This video has gone a little longer than what I expected, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and have a great day, and I will talk to you again in a little bit. Peace.